Hello there and a very warm welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I'm Victor Matthias. Now, the keenly contested 2023 general elections are now in the past, with election petition tribunals sitting all round to address the grievances of the contestants. However, while this is ongoing, all is set for the May 29th swearing in and handover. And as presidents and governors are mandated by law to announce their cabinet members within the first 6 months, what will be at stake for young people when that begins to happen. According to figures provided by INEC, about 37 million or 39.65% of total voters are between the ages of 18 and 34, while 33,400,000 or 35.75% are middle-aged persons between ages of 35 and 49. We also understand that about 18.94% of the total registered voters are elderly voters between the ages of 50 and 69, just as the remaining 5.66% are senior citizens above the age of 70. Now, so in all of this now, where do young people stand when the time begins, or when the time comes, for all of these ministers, commissioners, heads of parastatals of governments, where would the place of young people be? Well, that would be our focus today on the show. But before we get into all of that, let's first of all take a look at the trending topics in the past week.
The Movie Awards was the talk of the town as actors were rewarded for the work they put in the previous year. The event had the creme de la creme of African screen gracers who were gaily dressed for the occasion. Some controversy trailed the event, though, as some felt certain winners were not deserving over those who were nominated in their categories. Nigeria's blockchain policy was finally launched, and that drew mixed reactions amongst players in the tech ecosystem. While some have welcomed the policy, others are of the opinion that was not all-encompassing, as not many stakeholders were consulted before the policy was drafted. The committee to implement the policy has since been inaugurated by the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy.
Were the trends in the past week, and also now joining us to look at the trending topics for the topic of the day. We have with us right here in the Abuja studio, Hamzat Lawal. He is the CEO of Connected Development. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Hamzat.
Well, thank you for having me, Victor.
Absolutely. We also have joining us via Zoom from Ottawa in Canada, Abraham Great. He is a public affairs analyst. Abraham, it's a pleasure to have you join us on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, kickstart this conversation for us, Hamzat. Those figures, that I reeled out. I mean, clearly, young people, middle-aged people, because you've constantly, reminded me of the fact that you're no longer a youth. So middle-aged people, young people, actually played a key role in determining who would govern us, in the next 4 years. But the cake, as they usually say, how do you think young people should come in? I mean, what would be the best way to bring them in, to be part of governance from now moving forward?
You see, Victor, when you follow through the entire election value chain, from campaigns in the primaries, from campaigns towards the general election, and even during the election and even the aftermath of the elections, young people literally took the mandate in their hands, and they ensured that, they informed the outcomes of this entire elections and the value chain. So for me, the best way is to ensure that they're adequately engaged. I'm happy when I had the president-elect, that's Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu, saying that, his government would be an inclusive government, and he recognized the role of young people, and he would ensure that young people inform what becomes of his government. But our own expectation is, it needs to be clear. Is this incoming government going to say, 30%, 50% is going to be for young people? And what's their definition of young people? Youths, yes, young people, they play a key role, and they must ensure that they informed and engage adequately, in the next government. Yes, maybe ministerial position, heads of parastatal, various advisor role, but as much as I'm also advocating for young people to inform the next government, but this must be driven by capacity, by values to contribute, because yes, we want young people in the corridors of power, we want young people in governance. But these young people must be young people that have proven track record. They have done things, in different sectors, and now they're bringing them and creating an opportunity for them to contribute their quota to nation building in governance and politics and public administration. So, there's that high expectation on the president-elect once he's sworn into office.
Well, let me quickly also get to hear from Abraham, his own thoughts, as regards how young people should be brought into the system, governance, if you like. Now, Abraham, let me just, get to hear from you. Hamzat is saying that in as much as young people actually played a key role in determining those who would be governing us for the next 4 years, things that should be key is competence, character, capacity, capability, quite a number of C's therein. But in your own estimation, how do you think things should be?
First of all, there has to be a proper establishment of what the facts are or what the figures are. We have ambiguity in our population census to actually know the number of youth that are in the country. I think it was the United Nations population statistics that gave us the fact that we have 70% of Nigerian population is just between the age of 18 and 40. We don't really have, precise statistics to be sure that that is indeed the fact. So we need to, first of all, establish the fact. The next thing we need to do is to, the leadership, the coming administration have to improve upon communication. So not only the inclusion, part of the inclusion is engagement. So you will see that there is parity between government and the people. And that's why we see a lot of agitation in the country. I'll give you a typical example. In the current administration, you cannot, in a country that you have that kind of statistics, about 70% being said to be youth, and you have someone almost at the age of 70 or over the age of 70 or in their 60 as communication minister. I think you have already set up yourself. It's a recipe for miscommunication, discommunication, misappropriation of information, because you have generational gap. So one of the things that we will have to do is to get communication right between the administration and the citizenry. If more than 60% or said 70% of your country is
engagement, would happen. But let's even just do like a how would I put it now? Like a flashback, so to speak. In this current government, there were some young people who, were put in certain positions. If you were to do like a random selection and say, okay, this is how well, some of them, did, how would you rate?
Well, a lot of young people that made it to this current government did very well. My good friend Esther Agbarakwe, when she was made an aide to the Minister of Environment, who is now the Deputy United Nations Secretary General, did very well to moderate and ensure that the minister's office were providing real-time information, and also ensure that the digital strategy of her office, inform what she was doing in real time, how she's engaging with young people and stakeholders. Another person I am proud of is Ismail Ahmed, who was the then APC National Youth Leader, and I know he's an aide to the Social Investment Office. He's done really well in promoting what the Social Investment Office is doing, how they're undertaking issues around the homegrown school feeding program, the social investment around treasure money, market money, and conditional cash transfer. I can go on and on. There's also Ahmed Salhijo, who currently heads the Rural Electrification Agency. These are young people that have done very well. And I think these are examples that as citizens, as media houses, we should promote that, we already have a few young people, not as much as we want to, but they're doing very, very well, in public service, in government and governance. But again, I think what is important is for us to define, what becomes of, or what this incoming government sees as youth or young people. The National Youth Policy say 18 to 29. The African Youth Charter says 18 to 35, and that's why I say don't call me a youth. I'm a young person. But we know the realities of politics. And taking that demography of, the engagement of young people in politics. And for politics, we can say from 18, to 45. I don't want us to go to 50 because I don't want us to get involved in a generation that have lost their ways and who are just hanging and don't know what they should do. And it's not their fault. It's because of how politics have evolved in our country. And I think this could also inform the breeding ground for the next generation of leaders. Because you can't say you're planning for the future and you're not even engaged in the present. So again, there's an opportunity here, for us to send a signal that yes, we have over 90 or 70% of young people, but most importantly, we're engaging this force, we're engaging these numbers that have creativity, that have energy, and that have done well, by the way, in every other sector. But they've not been showcased in politics and public service because they've not been given that chance, or they've not created an enabling environment. By the way, in politics, nobody gives you a chance. But because Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as Iwaju has said, his government will be inclusive. So I want to believe that women, young people, both men and women, people with disability, would inform his government, both at cabinet level and heads of parastatal.
Well, it's good you made a long list of those who have pretty much carried the torch, blazed the trail as well. But let me also hear from Abraham. Abraham, are there any of those who perhaps you would say caught your eye in the as they carried out their duties, during this period, 4 to 8 years, as it were?
Yes, I would say so. There are so many, just like my colleague in the studio I've said, there are many people that they might not have position in the government in terms of, but they are the brain behind the government as it's running. Most of the bills that have been passed into law, 16 acts that have been passed into law, it's hugely driven by entrepreneurs, young people who their names may not be in government sheets, but they are one way or the other involved in running this current administration. So I'll give you a typical example of someone who have been there from his teenage, Dayo Israel, who is now the National Youth Chairman for APC. So that is a typical example who has been there from a young age. And you can see that from the antecedent of Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that you can see that most of the people that are in their 50s, their 60s today, he met them when they were in their early 20s. People like Fashola, people like the current governor of Lagos State, people like Dele Alake. So many of these people, he met them in their 20s or in their early 30s. But we have to realize that the government, the way they came about by a lot of amalgamation. So there will be some compensation that has to be done, and that is going to be troublesome because we're looking for competence, but at the same time, there will be a need for sense of rewarding some people. So creating a balance between that. And also, just like my colleague in the studio said, there is a group of people that are within a certain age. And this particular age is the age of 40 to 50. These people have been serving people in government, and by the United Nations qualification, they are no longer qualified as youth. So that's where someone like myself or my colleague in the studio falls. But they've been serving since their teenage or their early 30s. How exactly do we define who is youth? But there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of youth that are involved in government at local level, state level, and in many other levels in Nigeria already.
Well, I kind of quite agree. Hamzat is actually smiling here in the studio. I'm trying to get his thoughts as to why. But before I do all of that, speaking about those who, operates in the background, at times, you never get credit. So you never might get all of your work on your resume, so to speak. And, moving forward, what you need, to land those top jobs, influential positions in government is your resume. So how do we bridge that gap?
So bridging the gap is, first of all, to set our expectations right. It's not everybody that will be in governance. It's not everybody that will be ostentatious. It's not everybody that will be known. If the motive is right, if we really want to advance our country, we should also be happy by having positions that are not ostentatious, which means that we are supporting the arms. Some of the names that we now know in government, we do not know them 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but they've been there. So youth also have to learn that we have to get involved in national politics, national governance, and the national economy by becoming entrepreneurs ourselves. So an average Nigerian thinks that we will only make it in government. But actually, every one of us can become social entrepreneurs. We can lead our country from where we are, and then the more success we have, we will catch the attention of the federal government. You catch the attention, because if you are doing well, if you are outstanding, if you are good at what you do, one way your name will be mentioned somewhere and you become more and more relevant. So we should move away from positional service to becoming competent individuals, people of integrity. Then our character, our competence would then fetch us out.
Speaking about fetching us out, we have to wait and see, how all of this will play. But let me just hold you there for a bit, hold Hamzat as well for a bit. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment. Please stay with us. Well, there you go. Welcome back. And of course, thankfully, no one spilled his tea and tapped on the wrong button. But we have with us right here in the Abuja studio, Hamzat Lawal, as well as Abraham Grates, who is joining us via Zoom from Odara in Canada. Hamzat, again, we're still looking at how, you can put yourself out there, speaking about working in the background, but perhaps not taking credits for all of the work that you do. Abraham earlier on talked about, some of the acts that have been passed that were worked on by, young people. I mean, and, their principals actually take the credit for it. So, again, bridging the gap seems to be a problem. How do you put yourself out there, against all odds, against the towering figure, covering you, to put yourself out there and get the recognition you perhaps deserve?
Well, the point we are in our political history, it's not time for credit. What is time for now is to put in the work. And I think that as young people, and because we're very good at storytelling and leveraging on digital platforms, there's so many things that if you would see of me doing, for instance, that you never see on my CV. I think my CV is just 2 pages because I don't want to keep anybody bored. But what's important is the value you bring. And if you do good work, people will recognize you for that work that you've done rather than you've put in. And yes, and I agree, a lot of young people are aides or legislative aides to our lawmakers. And we have quite a few of our lawmakers in the 9th National Assembly that are quite young, from, some of the impacts of the Not Too Young to Run movement and getting President Buhari to sign the age reduction bill. But I think what's important now is not taking credit, because nation building, let Nigeria take credit. Let's us even try to change that negative narrative and, change the narrative about, Nigeria and the role of young people and how young people is changing and shaping the country. And maybe one bill I should even mention is the Startup Act. Yeah. I see a lot of entrepreneurs actually play a key role in ensuring that it becomes law today. So again, it's for each and every one of us to stop working in silos and consolidate. Yes, again, and we must recognize, and I like the fact that my brother in Ottawa mentioned that there's going to be patronage. Let's not try to deceive ourselves. There are people who worked for the party. There are people who worked for the success or the emergence of the president-elect. And they have some level of expectations. They expect that being loyal to the party and the new administration should and would definitely give them something. But what we're saying is, in as much as there's going to be some form of compensation, can we at least drive it with values? And what I mean values, the people you're bringing, let them have competence, let them have character, let them have empathy, let them understand engagement, let them be transparent and accountable, so that when civil society engages them with freedom of information requests, let them not feel like, they're lords and they're lording over people. No, you're here to serve. Politics is about service. Let's have people with competence, character, capacity, capability, but most importantly, proven track record. Because see, today, we don't want a new government that would now, be carried away with corruption and nepotism, that divides the country. And for me, and like I've always said, the first thing Bola Ahmed Tinubu should do is lead a campaign on national unity, reconciliation, and forgiveness, so that as a country, beyond the policies that would come, let us be on one page, but also put it at the center of young people, because we have the numbers, we have the energy, and if we tie into the vision, it will be successful for sure.
Well, it's good. You're already going into the future. So, Abraham, what would you want to see? Hamzat has pretty much, given us like a rundown of what he would want to see. What he expects the president-elect to do, first and foremost, when he takes over office. But what would you want to see? What would you want to be seeing, when he eventually comes into power?
I could sum it in about 3 or 4 things. One is intentionality. On his manifesto, The Renewed Hope, the president-elect elaborated on the fact that they really want to engage youth. So we would want to see him actually be intentional about that even the National Assembly is already constituted and most of the polity of the National Assembly is already settled behind the door. But we want to see the engagement of young people in the leadership of people that serve with members of the National Assembly in a way of discipling those young people into governance. Because those who are ruling Nigeria at the moment, if you look at their age, average is 60, 65, 70 to 80. In the next 16 years, these people will not be there, and they have to train a generation that will be coming after them. So younger people, a lot more young people need to be brought into the corridor of power and show a simulation of how the country runs. Another thing that I would like them to see is to actually emphasize on education. And by education, our education system is very, very trappy for our young people. Passing WAEC, passing JAMB is a breeding ground for corruption in the country, because the way those things have been structured, the exam problems and what have you, people are not properly educated. There needs to be introduction of national vocational qualifications in such a way there are people who have struggled for years and could not make it to university, but they are more qualified. They are more trained. They have worked in places, worked with people. So there needs to be a way to be able to capture those people who are nationally, if their education or experience is equivalent to a degree. How do we integrate those people to begin to now sum them into degree holders and then let them participate in governance, in leadership of the country? And the final thing I'm going to reiterate is communication. Communication is key. You realize that everywhere in the world, I use America because that's the kind of democracy that we practice in Nigeria. Even as old as the president of America is forced to tweet on a daily basis, is forced to do press conference almost on a daily basis. There is too much gap between leadership in Nigeria. Our leaders are almost like lords and savior, that everybody is hoping that the savior will come and speak to us in a public address that is done on a green screen and edited. No, we want our president to come out live on a regular basis. We want to see our, now the president-elect, we have given him daddy, we're calling him Idon. He might make some mistakes, but get engaged with the young people.
Yeah.
If there was one president that did that very well, at least reasonably well, that was President Olusegun Obasanjo. He was there everywhere, communicating with everybody.
Well, expectations will always remain expectations, and would hope that, when time comes, of course, these expectations would come to be, they would be implemented, and of course, when it's time again to come out and vote, the ability or the need to convince young people and middle-aged people, might not be as hard as, it should ordinarily be, because, of course, the opposition also would not rest on their oars, and they'll be out there trying to challenge. But that's where would have to leave the conversation. Thank you so very much for joining us today. As always, Hamzat Lawal, CEO of Connected Development, as well as Abraham, great public affairs analyst, who joined us via Zoom as well from Ottawa in Canada. Thanks to both of you for sharing your thoughts on this. And who knows, perhaps in the next 4 years, would maybe take a stock and see that all of these recommendations were actually put into place. But thank you again for joining us.
Thank you
on the show. Well, that's where we are. That's why we run up the show as well. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm Victor Matthias. Would leave you with the movie videos on our YouTube channel in the past week. Bye for now.
Kicking off this week's top 5 videos is the police vowing to bring to justice perpetrators of the attack on a U.S. Embassy convoy in the shortest time possible.
May I assure you all of the resolve and determination of the command and other security agencies to track down the perpetrators of this heinous crime and bring them to book in the shortest time.
It is followed by Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike urging the 10th National Assembly members to respect the zoning formula the APC and President-elect Bola Tinubu have taken with regard to leadership.
No president can do very well if he does not have that leadership that will cooperate with him. You remember what happened in 2015? That affected the performance of the present administration. So I think that the APC should see it for the interest of Nigeria. Let them respect the leadership of their party and the president to move forward.
Third spot sees presidential candidate of the PDP, Mr. Atiku Abubakar, accusing INEC of being partial in his petition against President-elect Bola Tinubu. Second spot is taken by the visit of Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu of Lagos State to Hilda Bassi during her record-breaking cooking exercise. While in first is the booing of Lamidi Apapa as the Presidential Tribunal resumed hearing.